A week before Christmas, I heard my son-in-law on the phone with his father. During the holidays, I'll kick this old man out and you'll move in with us. Rather than rage or grief, I kept my composure and quietly formed a plan. He thought he'd won something. Instead, he spent Christmas in the cold. Welcome back to Dad's Revenge. I'm glad you're here with me today. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know, just from the title and the thumbnail, what do you think this story is about? Take a guess. I'd love to see how close you get. A quick note before we begin: some details in this story have been shaped for the purpose of telling it well, and any resemblance to real individuals or events is purely coincidental. What matters is the truth at the heart of it. Preston's voice drifted down the hallway from what used to be my study. The door was shut, but the words leaked through anyway, muffled, animated. A phone call, most likely, though he talked to himself sometimes too. I turned toward the kitchen. Delia stood at the stove, wooden spoon, moving in tight, hurried circles. Her shoulders were drawn up close to her ears. She didn't turn around when I came in. "Evening," I said. "Hi, Dad." Her voice was thin, strained at the edges. Papers were spread across the kitchen table, mail mostly the usual heap of catalogs and bills. But one envelope lay open, its contents visible, a credit card statement. I recognized the logo and the account number, mine. The account I'd added Delia to 2 years back when she was finishing her master's degree and needed help covering textbooks. I'd never gotten around to removing her name after she graduated. Preston had been running charges on it for 6 months. I picked the statement up and scanned down the list. Most of it was unremarkable gas groceries, nothing that raised a flag on its own. Then I found it. December 14th. $3,200. The merchant was some faceless corporate name, Investment Services LLC. My jaw went tight. I set the paper back down carefully, exactly where I'd found it. Delia's spoon went still. She turned, saw what I'd been reading. "Dad, don't start." I kept my tone even. $3,000 is a lot, Delia. I just want to understand. Preston knows what he's doing. She cut across me, her voice sharp, already defensive before I'd pushed. "You wanted us to succeed, remember?" I let it go. We'd been through variations of this before. Different figures, different explanations, the same ending. I'd write another check or move more money over, and the pattern would hold. 2 years of this. 2 years of talk about the next big opportunity. The deal that was going to change everything. The investor practically lining up to get involved. Footsteps in the hall. Preston appeared in the doorway, all smiles, radiating easy confidence. Dressed the way he always dressed, business casual, the kind that implied important meetings without actually requiring them. Quarter-zip pullover chinos, a watch that cost more than it should. "Eugene didn't hear you come in." He stepped past me to kiss Delia on the cheek, then pulled a beer from the refrigerator. "How was the clinic?" "Fine," I said, "just looking in on a few post-op cases." I'd retired from my veterinary practice 3 years ago, selling it to a younger vet who called me in for consultations now and then. It kept me occupied, kept my hands in the work, and gave me a reason to be out of the house a few hours each week. That's great. Preston twisted the cap off. "Dinner smells incredible, babe." We sat down to eat about 20 minutes later. The dining room felt smaller than I remembered, though nothing physical had changed. Same table, same chairs, same sideboard that had been my parents'. But the air felt close to the room, somehow insufficient. Preston launched into his usual dinner performance, the deal he was working on, always some deal. This time it was commercial real estate, a strip mall in Renton due to be rezoned. He had an inside track, he said, real investors, solid backing. By February, they'd be in a completely different position. I worked through my chicken and dumplings and said nothing. Delia was making her chicken and dumplings, the one she used to make on Sundays. Something with rosemary thyme, that low warm smell of broth reducing on the stove. Delia smiled at him across the table, hopeful, eager, the same look she used to give me when she was 8 years old, and I'd promised to take her to the zoo on Saturday. "Speaking of bills," Preston said, his tone dropping to something offhand and casual. "The gas bill this month was higher than usual, $380. Winter rates, everyone's running their heat." I set my fork down, reached for the checkbook in my back pocket. Yes, I still use checks. I wrote out the amount, tore it loose, and slid it across the table. Preston picked it up, folded it once, tucked it into his pocket. "Thanks, Eugene. You're the best." I picked my fork back up. The food had gone lukewarm. After dinner, Delia stayed to clear up. Preston excused himself and headed back toward the study. I heard the door close, then the familiar creak of the office chair. My office chair, the one I'd bought 12 years ago, when my back started giving me trouble. I climbed the stairs, slowly feeling every one of my 67 years in my knees. My bedroom was at the far end of the hall. It had been the guest room once, back when I had the master downstairs, the one with the ensuite bathroom and the reading nook. 6 months ago, Preston had asked if they could have that room. More space for them, he'd said. They were talking about starting a family. I'd agreed. What kind of father says no to that? I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The room felt cramped, the ceiling lower up here, the walls pressing in. My clothes hung in a narrow closet. My books were stacked on a small shelf because the old bookcase hadn't fit. I'd handed that over to them as well for Preston's office. The last 2 years ran through my head like a slideshow I couldn't switch off. The promises, the business plans that never quite landed, the loans that were supposed to be short-term, the $47,000 I'd handed over. And that was before the credit card charges I'd just seen. I heard my sister Bernadette's voice in my head, the warning she'd given me 6 months ago when she'd visited for Thanksgiving. Eugene, he's never going to stop asking. You know that, right? He's using you. I'd defended Preston then. He's family, I'd said. He's trying. He just needs time. Family, I said quietly now to the empty room. The words sat hollow. I got up and started getting ready for bed. Then I realized I'd left my phone downstairs on the kitchen counter, still plugged in. I usually took it up with me, but tonight the credit card statement and Preston's dinner performance had knocked my routine loose. I opened my door and stepped into the hallway. The house had gone quiet, the kind that settles in once everyone retreats to their separate corners. I made my way toward the stairs, my feet automatically finding the boards that didn't creak, a habit worn in from years of moving through my house at night without disturbing anyone. At the bottom of the stairs, I turned toward the kitchen. That's when I heard Preston's voice again coming through the study door. It was open a crack just enough. He wasn't alone this time. A second voice answered him, deeper, older, on speakerphone. I stopped. My hand came to rest on the banister. I wasn't trying to listen, but I wasn't moving either. No, Dad, I'm telling you, he's perfect, Preston said. He won't even fight it. The other voice, muffled but audible. You're sure about the timeline? Absolutely. We do it right after Christmas. He'll be so shocked he won't know what hit him. And legally, we've got everything lined up. The air left my lungs. I stood locked in the hallway, every muscle frozen. Preston's voice rolled on, casual and unhurried, as though he were talking through weekend plans. Clifton, listen, I've been documenting everything. The guy's 70, practically senile, forgets. Conversations can't manage his own finances. We've got 2 years of me stepping in on bills, making calls about the house. Any judge will see he needs supervision. But the house is in his name alone. Clifton, Preston's father. I'd met him twice. Both times he'd looked at me like I was something he'd tracked in on his shoe. For now, that's why timing matters. Once we get incompetency established, Delia takes conservatorship. Then we can begin moving the assets over. The house by itself is worth $600,000, maybe more, given the market. My grip tightened on the banister. The wood bit into my palm. What about his sister? Clifton asked. Preston laughed, quick and dismissive. Bernadette lives in Spokane. She barely comes around. And even if she makes noise, what can she actually do? We'll have the paperwork, the legal standing. Eugene's been handing us power of attorney over account signing things without reading them. He trusts Delia completely, trusted past tense after this week. The nursing home angle, you're sure that'll hold? It's clean. We're not claiming he's too far gone for independent living, just that he needs assisted care, can't handle the stairs, can't cook safely, standard elderly concerns. We'll find a place in Bellevue, maybe Redmond somewhere, with enough distance that he can't simply walk back. And here's the part I love. We use his own money to fund it. He's got the retirement account, the pension from the clinic. That covers the costs for years. I couldn't move. My legs had stopped taking orders. When do you bring Delia in on the full plan? Clifton's voice had a careful edge. She knows enough. She understands we need the house, that Eugene's been a financial anchor. She doesn't need every detail. She'll go along with it, because what's her alternative? Go back to part-time teaching for $30,000 a year. She likes the life I've laid out for her. She'll talk herself into believing it's what's best for Eugene, and if he pushes back, he won't. The man writes me a check every time I ask. He gave up his bedroom without a single argument. He's the perfect victim, because he's too passive to protect himself. After Christmas, when everyone's feeling generous and forgiving, we'll sit him down, tell him we're worried about him, that we think he needs more care than we can provide. He'll resist for maybe a day, then fold like he always does. The conversation shifted to logistics. Lawyer Clifton knew the paperwork already drafted, the filing timeline mapped out. I stopped taking in the words. My mind had hit capacity. It was full, saturated with the weight of what I'd just heard. I backed away from the study, my feet finding the staircase by instinct, and climbed to my room. I shut the door without a sound, crossed to my bed, sat in the dark. I didn't reach for the light, didn't trust my hands to be steady enough. Perfect victim. The phrase kept turning over in my head. Perfect victim because I was too passive to protect myself, because I handed over checks without argument, because I'd surrendered my bedroom, my study, my dignity one piece at a time. I looked around the darkened room, my room, the smallest room in my own house, the house I'd bought 32 years ago, when Delia was 3 years old, the house where I'd raised her alone after her mother died, where I'd taught her to ride a bike in the driveway, helped her through calculus at the kitchen table, watched her walk across a graduation stage with honors. This house was mine legally, financially, in every sense that mattered, and they were scheming to take it, planning to park me in a facility and drain my accounts to keep me there while they settled into my home. My hands began to shake, not from fear, but from comprehension. I sat there through the night. Sleep never came. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard Preston's voice. Perfect victim, practically senile, dead weight. The hours wore on. I watched the darkness thin to gray, then to the pale blue that comes just before dawn. I went back through every interaction of the past 2 years. Every time Preston had asked for money, I'd given it. Every time he needed something, I'd supplied it. Every promise about paying me back getting established, turning things around, all fabrication. Deliberate manipulation. The gas bill, $380. He'd dropped that request at dinner like it was a given, like it was simply my role to cover it. And I'd written the check without hesitation because that had become my pattern. That's who I'd let myself become. $47,000. That was only what I'd tallied. The real number was likely worse. The credit card charges I hadn't known about. The loans Preston had steered Delia into requesting on his behalf. The home repairs he'd insisted on paid with my money, probably never carried out at all. I got up, moved to the window. The street below was still empty. Down the block, a single streetlight wavered, working up to switching off for the morning. In a few hours, the neighborhood would stir, people resuming their routines, going about their days. Preston would come downstairs for breakfast, probably land a joke, flash that grin. Delia would make coffee orbit around him the way she did every morning, and I would sit at the table and act as though I'd heard nothing. No. The word formed in my mind cleanly with weight. No, I had been passive. I had been accommodating. I'd told myself that family meant sacrifice, that love meant giving without any thought of return. But this wasn't family. This was theft. This was cruelty wearing the costume of concern. They had miscalculated. They'd assumed I was too old, too worn down, too hungry for connection to push back. They'd confused patience with weakness. I returned to my bed, sat down again. My breathing had leveled out. My hands were still. The shock was burning away, replaced by something colder and sharper clarity. I held advantages they knew nothing about. I'd heard the plan. I knew exactly how the timeline ran. And they had no idea that I knew any of it. Information was leverage. Surprise was a weapon. I thought about my sister Bernadette. I should have heeded her warning 6 months ago, but I could heed it now. I thought about the clinic, my former partner who still rang me up for input. I thought about my bank accounts, my retirement funds, the house deed sitting in a safe deposit box at the credit union. The sky outside moved from orange to pink. Dawn, Thursday morning, December 19th. 6 days until Christmas. 6 days before they intended to set their plan in motion. I stood crossed to the narrow closet, pulled out clothes. A shower could wait. What I needed was to think, to plan, to turn the anger burning in my chest into something that could actually be used. The victim was done. Whatever I had been yesterday, whatever compliant fool had slid that check across the dinner table, he no longer existed. I caught my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. Same face, same lines around the eyes, same gray in my close-cropped hair. But something behind my eyes had shifted. Something had gone hard. They wanted to take my house, my home. They wanted to lock me away, drain my money, erase me. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Let them try. Morning light began pressing through the window. I'd been sitting there for hours, fully dressed, waiting. Around 7 o'clock, I heard movement downstairs. Delia's footsteps in the kitchen. The rattle of the coffee maker. Preston's heavier tread moving through the hallway toward the bathroom. Ordinary morning sounds. An ordinary morning for them. I stood, took one last look in the mirror. The same face I'd shown every day yesterday, the day before. Every day for 2 years. Patient, accommodating, harmless. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed my wallet and keys. Time to go. Downstairs, Delia was lifting dishes from the cabinet. She glanced over when I stepped into the doorway. Going somewhere, Dad? Just a morning walk. I kept my voice easy, unhurried. Need some air, clear my head a bit. She nodded, already turning back to the counter. Okay, don't forget we're decorating the tree this afternoon. I managed a smile. Wouldn't miss it. Preston came in from the hallway, hair still damp from the shower. He raised his coffee mug. Morning, Eugene. Early start today. Can't sleep in like I used to. I tapped my jacket pocket. Getting old, you know. He laughed, that loose, self-assured sound. You're not old, Eugene. You're seasoned. I went out through the front door and headed down the walk toward the street. This was my usual direction, left at the corner, around the block, back in about 30 minutes. Delia had likely already stopped thinking about it. Preston certainly had. But I didn't turn left at the corner. I kept going past my usual route toward where I'd left my car the night before, 3 blocks away, sitting at the curb on a quieter side street. I got in, started it up, and pulled away from the neighborhood. Downtown Seattle was 20 minutes in light traffic. I drove steadily, hands easy on the wheel, my mind already sorting through what needed to be done. The Central Library opened at 9 o'clock. I intended to be there when the doors came unlocked. The library building rose 11 stories, steel and glass, familiar ground, from years of visits when Delia was young. I'd brought her here for summer. Reading programs helped her dig into school projects. Now I was here for research of a different kind. Inside, I moved past the main desk, past the computer stations, where early patrons checked email and filled out job applications. The legal reference section occupied a quiet corner on the 2nd floor. Good. I worked along the shelves, pulling down Washington revised statutes, property law guides, tenant rights materials. Carried them to a corner table where no one would bother me. My notebook came out small, plain, the kind I'd always carried for quick notes on patient cases. I opened to a blank page and got to work. 2 hours passed. My pen moved steadily across the pages, logging statute numbers, relevant passages, procedural steps. ORS 105.165. That was the governing statute for my situation. I photographed key pages with my phone, making sure the text came through clearly. The work was methodical, focused habits from decades of veterinary practice now applied to a very different kind of problem. The most important finding came about an hour in. Because the house was registered solely in my name, and because Preston had never formalized any kind of investment or rental arrangement, I held complete legal authority. He wasn't a tenant, he wasn't a co-owner, he was a guest, and guests could be asked to leave. I sat back, pen in hand. The law was on my side, not through some technicality, but simply because it was my house, my property, my name on the deed. That knowledge settled into me like ballast. But knowing wasn't sufficient on its own. I needed professional guidance. Someone who understood the procedures, the paperwork, the correct sequence of steps. Someone who could help me do this right. I gathered the books and put them back on their shelves. Near the reference desk, a community board held rows of pinned business cards, attorneys, financial planners, real estate agents. I looked through them until I found what I was after. Linfield and Associates property law and tenant relations. Out on the library steps, I pulled out my phone and dialed. 2 rings. Linfield and Associates. How may I help you? I kept my voice measured and professional. I'm looking to discuss property law and eviction procedure. The matter is urgent. Are you the owner or a tenant owner? My name alone is on the title. A short pause, keyboard sounds in the background. Mr. Linfield has an opening tomorrow, Friday at 2 o'clock. I'll be there. I'll have everything with me. I ended the call. 1 step down. By tomorrow, I'd have an attorney in my corner. For today, I just had to keep playing the role. I drove back left, the car 3 blocks out, walked to the front door. Delia had lunch going in the kitchen. Preston was stretched out on the living room couch, laptop balanced on his knees, doing that thing he did, projecting industry while accomplishing nothing. How was the walk? Dad? Delia called as I hung my jacket. Good. cleared my head. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. Fresh out there this morning. Preston drifted in from the other room, all warmth and good humor. Eugene, good timing. Listen, I went ahead and invited my dad for Christmas dinner. Should be fine, right? He never actually waited for the answer, plus a few others. Maybe 12 people all told. Big occasion. I looked at him steadily. Of course, Preston. This is your home too. The words were ash in my mouth, but nothing reached my face. Preston's grin widened. Exactly. Proper family Christmas. My dad's been talking about it. I gave a slow nod. I'm sure he has. I knew perfectly well what Clifton was looking forward to. The grand moment. The gentle, concerned conversation about Eugene's fading faculties. The ring of friendly witnesses there to lend legitimacy when they announced I needed to be moved somewhere more suitable. Wonderful, I said. The more the merrier. Delia looked relieved. No argument from me, no friction. She'd completely misread what my silence meant. So had he. After lunch, I made my excuses, went upstairs, shut my bedroom door, and spread everything across the small desk by the window, checkbook register, bank statements, credit card records. A full reckoning was overdue. I started entering figures and columns, date amount what it was supposedly for Preston's assurances about paying it back. Careful, unhurried work. Every line I wrote made the next step feel more justified. January 2022. Mortgage assistance $3,000, I said under my breath. Pen moving. February business investment $5,000. Temporary, of course. That word had a bitter taste by now. March utilities, car trouble, groceries. Page after page. Every time he'd said just until this deal closes. Every time I'd taken him at his word. All of it written down now. I got to the bottom of the second page and ran the total. $47,300. 24 months of retirement money, handed over for nothing, for a performance of optimism and false deadlines. I put the pen down and looked around the small room. This was what I had to show for it. Cramped quarters, less room to breathe. A convenient cash source living in his own house. Tomorrow, the attorney. Tomorrow, things would start to turn. Friday, 1:30. I told Delia I had a dentist visit, slipped out the front door, and drove downtown to Seattle. The offices of Linfield and Associates were on the third floor of a building on 4th Avenue. Glass entry reception area done in gray carpet chairs, the works, and a row of diplomas across one wall. Solid and established. Exactly the right setting. She'd barely glanced up when I left. The woman at the front desk had everything in order. Mr. Calloway, Mr. Linfield is expecting you. Arthur Linfield looked to be around 50. Tortoiseshell glasses, blazer draped over the back of his chair. He came around the desk when I walked in and put out his hand. Firm, unhurried. Mr. Calloway, come sit down. I took the chair across from him and set my notebook on the desk, research figures, the whole paper trail I'd built. I'm grateful you could fit me in so quickly, I said. You made it sound pressing on the phone. Linfield drew a legal pad in front of him and clicked his pen. Walk me through it, I did. Methodical, start to finish. The house mine alone bought 32 years ago, my name exclusively on the deed. My daughter and son-in-law arriving 2 years back, supposedly just until they got their footing. No paperwork, no agreement of any kind. Family trust in place of a contract, then the money. $47,300 across 24 months. The promises that never turned into anything. The slow creep into every corner of the house. Charges on my credit card I'd never approved. Linfield wrote, nodded occasionally, asked a question here and there. Professional and unreadable. When I ran out of things to say, he laid the pen flat. So you want them gone? Yes. I kept my eyes on his. I want my house back. He laced his fingers and leaned back. A direct question. Any written rental agreement, any document promising them an ownership stake or investment return. Not a word of it in writing. All verbal. The deed has only your name, only mine. They've contributed nothing toward rent, not once. Every bill has been mine. Linfield gave a slow nod. The legal picture is clear. Under Washington Revised Statute 105.165, they have guest status, not tenant status. You can terminate that arrangement with the right notice. Something in my chest released confirmation from someone who knew what he was talking about. What's the required notice period? 30 days is the standard when guests have been in the property a significant length of time. With family involved, I'd stay at the full 30 to cut off any eviction challenge before it starts. I took my phone out and pulled up the calendar. If notice goes out, Monday, December 23rd, they'd have to be out by January 22nd. That's right. Linfield made a note. It has to be written served properly. I'll draft the document. It needs the date they're required to leave the legal grounds and an unambiguous instruction to vacate. What happens if they dig in? Once the 30 days pass without compliance, you go to court for formal eviction. In practice, most people move when they realize the law doesn't favor them. Contesting it means a public record attached to their names, which complicates any future housing. I thought of Preston, all that breezy certainty that I'd never push back. One more thing I need to raise. I heard them discussing a plan to have me declared incompetent and seize the house through conservatorship. Linfield's manner shifted. When was this Wednesday evening? They had a timeline, a whole strategy laid out. Christmas was the intended starting point. Is any of that on record? No documentation, just what reached my ears. More notes. That raises the stakes considerably. If legal action is already in motion against you, you need to get ahead of it. Every step you take now, managing your own affairs, making reasoned decisions about your property cuts against an incompetency argument. That's exactly my thinking. One more recommendation, revisit your will and power of attorney. Get everything updated current and pointing towards someone you actually trust, someone other than your daughter, to act on your behalf, if it ever comes to that. I hadn't moved on that yet. My sister Bernadette. She's in Spokane. Good choice. We can take care of those as well. He reached for a form and started filling in the top. For now, the termination notice is the priority. I'll have a clean draft ready Monday morning. How are you thinking of serving it? In person, I said without a moment's hesitation. Christmas dinner. They're bringing his father a crowd of friends. They intended that evening as the stage for their announcement about me. I'll make it mine instead. Linfield's eyebrow went up slightly. That's a bold move. That's justice. He held my gaze for a moment, then accepted it. Fair enough. The notice will be ready Monday. 2 copies, one to hand over, one for your file. If they won't sign to acknowledge receipt, that's not a problem. Witness delivery stands up. We went through the particulars, precise wording, the sequence of steps that would follow, what to expect from each one. The fee $2,800 covering the consultation, the documents and support through the 30-day window. I said yes without pause. Measured against the $47,000 I'd poured into Preston's schemes, this was the most sensible money I'd spent in 2 years. Linfield covered the remaining ground, locks if it came to that, cataloging their belongings, handling anything left behind. Thorough and methodical. One last point he said as we finished up. Keep a detailed record of everything going forward, every conversation, every written exchange, every dollar. If a judge ever looks at this case, that log will matter. I've kept records since Thursday morning. I flipped the notebook open, columns of transactions dates notes. He looked at it. Good, don't stop. He got to his feet and reached across the desk. Documents will be ready by 11 o'clock Monday. Come by whenever suits you. I gripped his hand and felt what 2 years of drift had cost me, the solidity of having legal ground under my feet again. All that time, feeling like an outsider in my own home, and sitting across from Linfield, hearing him lay out what the law actually said, I finally saw it clearly. The authority had always been mine. I simply hadn't reached for it. Outside, the cold had settled in properly, clouds sitting heavy over the city. I walked back to the car without rushing, letting the steadiness work its way through me. The law wasn't on my side. Through some trick or angle, it was on my side, because the house was mine, the deed was mine, the right was mine. I pulled out into traffic and headed home, through streets thick with Christmas shoppers. I want to pause here for just a moment, because what I was about to uncover went far deeper than I'd imagined, and it would confirm exactly the kind of people I was dealing with. Before we get there, tell me this. If you discovered that someone living under your roof had been quietly working against you, would you confront them head on, or would you gather every piece of proof first and let the truth do the talking? The radio was running holiday music songs about joy and togetherness and goodwill. I switched it off. 4 days until Christmas, 4 days until Preston's planned humiliation. 4 days until I turned the whole thing back on them. The house came into view ahead, windows lit, looking warm and welcoming from the street. Preston and Delia were probably in there right now, going over the details for the dinner, rehearsing their parts, completely certain of the outcome. I pulled into my usual spot, Cut the engine sat a moment in the gathering dark. Monday, I'd collect the documents from Linfield. Christmas Day, I'd hand them over. And 30 days after that, the house would be mine again. Everything else would flow from there. Morning came with thin winter light pressing through the window. Saturday. 2 days before, I'd pick up the paperwork from Linfield. 3 days before Christmas dinner. 3 days before, everything shifted. I came down to find Delia dragging boxes out of the hall closet decorations, spreading across the living room floor. Strings of lights in a tangle, ornaments packed in tissue, the artificial tree standing stripped in the corner, waiting to be filled out. She looked up when she heard me. "Dad, you don't need to get involved if you're worn out." I lifted a box from her hands and set it on the coffee table. "Not a chance. It's Christmas. Time for family." The tension in her face eased into a smile. Relief really that I wasn't being awkward, wasn't making things hard. I started in on the lights, working out the knots methodically, the way I'd done it every year for 30 years, when Delia was young, and this house belonged to just the two of us. Preston drifted in from the kitchen, coffee in hand, watching. He said nothing, but I read his face. Satisfaction. The old man was cooperating, fitting himself into the role they'd cast for him. I strung lights along the staircase banister, hung ornaments on the lower branches, set the ceramic angel display near the front window. Every move deliberate, every gesture part of the act. Preston took it all in, with visible pleasure, reading my compliance as surrender. By mid-morning, the house looked exactly right, warm, festive, the ideal backdrop for a family Christmas. The perfect stage for what was actually coming. At breakfast, Preston laid papers out across the table among the cups and glasses. Another proposal, another ground floor opportunity. I knew the shape of it by heart, the pitch delivered with conviction, the projection charts, the unshakable confidence. 5,000 gets us in at the ground level. Eugene, he tapped the page. This one is different. Real investors, real backing, market position that puts us ahead of. I picked up my coffee, set it back down. That's a significant amount, Preston. I know, but the potential. His eyes were alive with it, already counting on my yes. Let's revisit this after Christmas. My voice stayed level, reasonable. We'll sit down properly once the holidays are behind us. The brightness went out of his face a little. But the window on this. After the holidays. Preston. Delia stepped in quickly, taking it as a concession. That's fair. Let's just get through Christmas first. Preston nodded and accepted the delay. Not a no, so not worth pushing. The money would materialize eventually. It always had. I watched him gather the papers, slide them into a folder, watched him recalibrate a just move onto the next calculation. He had no idea I'd never write him another check. No idea that after the holidays meant never. That evening dinner finished and cleared. I broke the quiet of the living room. Delia was in her chair with a book. Preston was on the couch scrolling his phone. The picture of an ordinary evening. "I've been thinking about Christmas dinner," I said. Delia looked up. "What is it, Dad? I'd like to say a few words during the meal. About family. What it really means. Something from the heart." Preston was out of his seat before I'd finished the sentence, crossed the room, and brought his hand down heavily on my shoulder. That move, he had dominance dressed up as warmth. "That's perfect, Eugene." His voice was full of performed feeling. "Seriously, we'd love nothing more. We love you, man. You matter to us." I held his gaze, gave him a smile. "I appreciate that, Preston. It means a great deal." The irony didn't touch him. He thought I was settling into my role, delivering the last sentimental scene before they made their move, that my few words would be soft and easy to brush aside once they announced their concerns about my competence. I gave him nothing to correct that impression. After they turned in Preston first, then Delia. About an hour later, I sat in my room with my phone. Found Bernadette's number, dialed. She picked up on the second ring. "Eugene, it's late. Is something wrong?" I kept my voice low, close to the wall. "I need you at Christmas dinner this Wednesday. It's important." A pause. "What's happening? I can't go into it now, but I need you there. Will you come?" She went quiet for a moment. Bernadette knew me well enough to hear what wasn't being said. "What time should I get there?" Something in my chest loosened. 5:30. "And Bernadette, thank you." Her voice was steady. "I've been waiting for you to do something about all this. Whatever it is, I'll be there." I hung up and pulled out my notepad, wrote out the full guest list one more time. 12 names in total. Preston's father, Clifton. Preston's business associate, Garrett. 2 couples from the neighborhood Preston had gotten friendly with. Delia's former colleague from her teaching days, and Bernadette. 12 people to witness what was coming. I circled Clifton Farrow's name, twice the co-conspirator, the man who'd sat on the phone and helped map out my removal from my own home. He'd watch his son's scheme fall apart in front of a room full of people. I folded the list and put it in the desk drawer alongside Linfield's card. Everything was lining up: the legal foundation, the documentation, the witnesses, the moment. 3 more days. I looked around the small room before I switched off the light. In 3 days, this would begin to be my house again. My home, my space, all of it. Sunday morning, Preston headed out around 10. He mentioned something about getting together with Garrett to work through the details on a business lunch the following week. He'd be out for 2 hours, maybe 3. That would do. I gave it 15 minutes after his car left the street, then went downstairs to the study. My former study. The room they had claimed 6 months ago and filled with Preston's desk, his filing cabinets, his equipment and papers. The door was almost never locked. Why would they lock it? It hadn't crossed their minds that I might be a threat. Inside the room carried the smell of Preston's cologne stale coffee paper. His laptop was closed on the desk, the power indicator still lit. He never shut it down completely, just folded the lid. Careless habit. Useful for me. I opened it. The screen came up asking for a password. I'd been watching him type it for months, standing in doorways, moving through the hall, looking without appearing to look. His fingers always went to the same sequence. MAUDE 2012. The year they'd married. The machine unlocked. I set my phone beside the laptop, opened the Notes app, and got to work. Methodical, folder by folder. Tax records first. I knew what I'd reported as household income across the past 2 years, my pension, Social Security, the rental from the clinic property I still held. I wanted to see what Preston had reported. The returns were filed jointly with Delia. I went through them line by line. My income showed correctly. Delia's part-time teaching income looked right, but then there was another entry tucked into investment income, $8,600. I read it twice. Investment income. From an account I'd never been told about, never seen referenced anywhere. I went into his email, searched for statements and brokerage notices, found them without much trouble. He'd organized them by month in labeled folders. The account was his alone, opened 2 years back, the same month they'd moved in. Regular deposits running through it all on the smaller side, 200 here, 300 there. Money diverted from the investments I'd funded, the expenses I'd covered. Every check I'd handed him, he'd siphoned a share into this private account. $8,600 that was supposed to go toward building something toward their future, their footing, their supposed stability. Instead, it had gone somewhere Delia knew nothing about, somewhere I certainly hadn't known about. I took screenshots, every statement, every transaction, every deposit, sent them from his account to mine, then deleted the sent message, cleared any trace of what I'd done. The laptop went back to sleep exactly as I'd found it. Upstairs in my room, I moved the screenshots into a folder on my phone, backed everything up to cloud storage, and ran off printed copies on the small printer on my desk. Documentation. Evidence. Something that went well past the eviction plan, proof of systematic theft. Not loose money redirected here and there. A pattern sustained over 2 full years. I sat looking at the printed statements. $8,600 stacked on top of the $47,300 I'd already tallied. Combined with the credit card charges I'd discovered, Wednesday night, the total was something else. But beyond the money, this demonstrated intent. Deliberate, calculated deception, maintained without a break. Not a struggling son-in-law who'd gotten in over his head. A con man who'd identified his mark and worked the angle. I allowed myself a thin smile. He'd left the trail right there. I'd followed it through. That evening, Preston came home buzzing with energy, riding high on something. He found me in the living room and dropped onto the couch next to me with the easy comfort of a man who considered this place his own. "Great meeting with Garrett," he said. "Everything's falling right into place." "That's wonderful," I told him, keeping my voice as bright as his. "I'm glad it's coming together." "It really is." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "Hey, my dad wants to say hello." He started a video call. Clifton Farrow's face filled the screen. That same look I'd clocked both times we'd crossed paths. Superiority wearing the thin costume of courtesy. "Eugene, good to see you." Clifton's voice came through a little tinny, but perfectly clear. "Looking forward to Christmas dinner. Preston tells me you're giving a speech." "Just a few words," I said, keeping my face open and warm. "About family gratitude, the things worth holding on to." "Beautiful." Clifton gave an approving nod. "Family is everything, isn't it? Looking after one another, making sure everyone's properly taken care of." The words had layers he didn't expect me to catch. Looking after one another, making sure everyone's properly taken care of. Language and code covering the plan they still believed was their secret. "Absolutely," I agreed. "Making sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve." Preston laughed, pleased. Clifton smiled. Neither one caught the other edge beneath it. They talked a while longer, logistics for Wednesday, what time to arrive, where to park. I played my part, said the right things, hit every cue. When the call ended, Preston looked satisfied, reassured in whatever he'd told his father about how cooperative I'd been. "He's excited to see the house," Preston said, sliding his phone into his pocket. I told him how much we've put into making it a real home. Making it a home. As though he'd brought anything to this house beyond deception and theft. "I'm sure he'll be impressed," I said. Preston stood, stretched, angled toward the kitchen. "Want anything? I'm grabbing a snack." "I'm fine, thanks." He left whistling loose and confident and completely in the dark, unaware that I had documentation of his hidden account. Copies of every bank statement, evidence of systematic theft, stored in 3 separate locations. Unaware that the man he'd written off as a soft, pliable target had spent the day assembling an airtight case against him. I sat alone in the living room, listening to him rummage around in the kitchen, following the sound of his cheerful humming. Tomorrow, I'd collect the documents from Linfield. Wednesday, I'd deliver them. 30 days after that, Preston and Delia would be gone. And every dollar they'd taken, every lie they'd constructed, every move they'd made, all of it was on paper now. Every single thing. Monday morning came in clear and cold. I was up early, dressed with care, checked my reflection, professional, composed, ready. The drive to Linfield's office was 20 minutes through thin holiday traffic. Most people had the week off home, with family getting ready for Christmas. I was getting ready too, just not the way they were. Mr. Linfield met me in his office and gestured to the chair across from his desk. 2 envelopes rested on the surface between us, a thick manila folder and a smaller white one. He tapped the manila folder. "Everything you asked for is here. The eviction notice will change property declaration, financial accounting." I nodded. "And the other envelope," he slid it across. "Evidence of the secret account. Bank statements, transaction history, current balance. $8,600 he claimed not to have." I picked it up and held it carefully. "This is all legally sound. Completely. You have every right to remove guests from your own property, and the financial evidence backs your position." He paused and held my gaze. "My advice, serve it with witnesses present. Stay calm. Let the documents do the talking." I opened the manila envelope and went through each document in turn. Eviction notice on official letterhead, dated December 25th. Will modification bearing a notary seal, striking Delia as beneficiary, and naming the Washington Animal Welfare Trust as the recipient of my estate. Property declaration with witness signatures affirming sole ownership. A financial spreadsheet itemizing every dollar, $47,300, broken down by date and purpose. The second envelope held bank statements from Preston's hidden account. Every deposit, every transaction, every lie laid out in black and white. I placed both envelopes in my leather folder, took out my checkbook, and wrote the final payment. We shook hands. "Done. Good luck tomorrow," Mr. Linfield said. "Thank you." I meant it. From his office, I drove straight to my bank. The estate planning officer was expecting me. I'd called Friday to set the appointment. She was efficient and professional, somewhere in her 40s, all business. She went through the documents one last time. "Just to confirm, Mr. Calloway, this trust is irrevocable. Once executed, you cannot alter the beneficiary or reclaim the property. You understand that? Upon your death, the house passes automatically to the Washington Animal Welfare Trust. No probate, no contest period." I signed the final page. "That's exactly what I want. No one inherits this house but the trust." She notarized my signature, stamped and filed the copies. "All set. Certified copies will come to you." I tucked them into the folder beside the attorney documents. Everything official, legal, permanent. Even from the grave they'd get nothing. I got home just after noon. The house was alive with motion. Delia was working in the kitchen putting together dishes for the next day's dinner. Preston was moving through the living room, shifting furniture to fit 12 guests. Children ran by, with ribbons and ornaments, energy bouncing off every wall. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room and watched. Delia sampled something from the stove and adjusted the heat. Preston hummed as he positioned chairs around the extended dining table. The children laughed, decorating, carrying on. None of them noticed me standing there. None of them saw the folder under my arm. I went upstairs to my bedroom, closed the door, opened the folder, and took out the brown envelope holding the documents. I held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Substantial, consequential. Tomorrow, this would change everything. I set it on my bed, walked back downstairs, rejoined the household, helped where I was asked, smiled when it was called for, and kept the performance going for one more day. That evening after dinner, wound down after the excitement, finally drained away, and everyone drifted off to their own corners. Delia upstairs bathing the children, Preston in the study with his phone, the house settling into its quieter rhythms. I went back to my bedroom. I picked up the brown envelope, then grabbed the waterproof bag I'd bought weeks earlier and the roll of clear packing tape from my desk drawer. I came back downstairs carrying only those items. The dining room was empty, the lights low. The table stood already dressed for 12 plates, arranged glasses set, silverware gleaming beneath the chandelier. I moved to it slowly. I slid the envelope into the waterproof bag, sealed the zipper with care, then lowered myself to my knees. The carpet pressed into my joints as I reached up and pressed the package against the underside of the tabletop, precisely where Preston's chair would be. Center seat, head of the table, the spot where he'd planned to sit when he announced my eviction. I tore strips of tape and pressed them firmly across the package, making sure it held invisible from above, centered exactly where he'd be. I backed out carefully, stood brushed off my trousers, and looked around. No one had seen. He wanted witnesses. He'd have them. I went back upstairs, with the tape put it away in my desk drawer, and sat on the edge of my bed. Tomorrow, 12 people would see exactly who Preston was and what I was capable of. The trap was set. Christmas Eve passed in a blur of final preparations and manufactured calm. I played my role, helped Delia with last-minute cooking, laughed with the children, watched Preston work the phone, confirming guests. Everyone believed tomorrow would be a celebration. Christmas Day broke bright and cold, the house filled with the smell of roasting ham, baking rolls warming casseroles. Delia moved through the kitchen, with focused determination, building the perfect feast. Preston arranged wine glasses and lined up bottles along the sideboard. Everything deliberate, precise, staged. By 5 o'clock, guests were coming through the door. Preston's colleagues, Garrett and his wife, the neighbors from down the street, Delia's former teaching colleague, each bringing dishes or bottles or gifts, each welcomed warmly into my home. Bernadette arrived at 5:30, right when I'd asked her to. She pulled me into a hug that lasted a beat longer than usual and whispered close to my ear, "Whatever this is, I'm here." Clifton Farrow arrived last at 5:45. He carried 2 large suitcases, an odd thing for a dinner guest. Preston met him at the door, with enthusiasm helping him set the bags in the hallway near the entrance. I watched from the living room. Those suitcases weren't packed with clothes or presents. They were there to hold my belongings, to box me up after dinner, and ship me off to whatever facility they'd already chosen. I'd known they would show up, but seeing them there, solid and physical actual proof of what they'd planned, it settled something in me, made everything I was about to do feel exactly right. By 6 o'clock, everyone had gathered in the living room. Conversation moved freely, wine flowed. Preston worked the room, with ease playing host in my house. Delia glowed proud of the gathering she believed she'd built. At 6:15, Delia announced dinner. Everyone moved into the dining room and found their seats. I'd laid out the place cards myself the night before, Preston at the head of the table, exactly where I'd put the documents. Delia to his right, Clifton to his left. Bernadette placed next to me a few seats away from the center. I didn't take my seat. Instead, I pulled on my coat, picked up the overnight bag I'd packed that morning, and slipped quietly out the front door. I drove to a hotel downtown, where I'd reserved a room 3 days earlier, checked in, ordered room service, and switched on my phone notifications. At 6:45, my phone buzzed. A text from Preston. "Where are you?" I typed 3 words. "Check under table." Sent. Then I waited. Back at the house, Preston read those words with genuine confusion, showed the phone to Delia, then to Clifton. Guests picked up on the murmuring, the uncertain looks passing between them. Delia suggested maybe I'd left something there. A gift, perhaps. Preston shrugged, pushed his chair back and bent down. His fingers found the waterproof package taped to the underside of the table. He pulled it loose and straightened up, holding it baffled. Everyone was watching now. He unzipped the bag, drew out the brown envelope, broke it open. The first document was the eviction notice. Official letterhead. His name, Delia's name. 30 days to vacate the premises effective. December 25th. His face went pale. Second document, will modification. Delia removed as beneficiary. Washington Animal Welfare Trust named as sole recipient. His hand began to shake. Third document, financial accounting. $47,300. Every payment itemized, every date, every broken promise. He set them on the table. Guests leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Someone whispered. Someone else gasped. Fourth document, bank statements. The secret account. $8,600 he'd kept hidden. Money he'd sworn he didn't have while asking for more. Delia snatched the statements and read them. Her face crumpled. The last page was my note, handwritten brief. Preston, I heard you Wednesday night, every word. Your plan to have me declared incompetent, the timeline, Clifton's involvement, the nursing home, all of it. You wanted an audience for your announcement. I'm giving you mine. 12 witnesses to your lies, your theft, your betrayal. The house is mine. It has always been mine. You have 30 days to leave. Eugene. My phone rang at 7:10. Preston. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again straight away. Delia this time. I declined the call. A text came in from Bernadette. I'm staying. Guests are leaving. Preston's losing it. Clifton screaming about lawsuits. Delia's crying. You did it. Another text, 5 minutes after that. Everyone's gone except Clifton and me. He's demanding to know where you are. I told him it doesn't matter. The eviction is legal. He knows it. I set down the phone, ordered a drink from room service, and settled by the window with the city lights spread out below me. Tomorrow I'd go back home. Tomorrow the 30-day countdown would begin. Tomorrow Preston and Delia would start making calls, pulling things together, scrambling for somewhere else to land. Tonight I sat in a quiet hotel room that belonged to no one but me, where no one could manipulate me, steal from me, or plot my removal. For the first time in 2 years, I felt free. The weight I'd been carrying since they moved in, the pressure, the obligation, the endless giving lifted. Just gone, replaced by something solid and settled. Justice, not revenge. Justice. They'd moved in planning to take everything. Instead, they'd walked away with nothing. 12 witnesses had seen the proof. 12 people now knew exactly who Preston was, what he'd done, what he'd intended. The humiliation he'd designed for me had landed squarely on him. Perfect symmetry. I raised my glass toward the window, toward the city, toward the house that was mine again. Merry Christmas, I said quietly to the empty room, and I meant every word of it. Oh. Delia's hand shot across the table and pulled the documents from Preston's frozen grip. Her eyes moved fast across the pages. Eviction notice, will modification, financial accounting. Every line landed like a blow. She turned to the next page, then the next. Bank statements. Preston's hidden account. $8,600. She looked up at him, the color gone from her face. Preston, what is this? He didn't answer. Couldn't. Her phone was already in her hand, fingers trembling as she dialed. Around the table, 12 witnesses sat in stunned silence watching. Dad? Her voice cracked on the single word. Eugene's voice came through the phone, calm, measured, almost gentle. Delia, I'm sorry to ruin Christmas, but I couldn't play this game anymore. What game? Tears ran down her face. Dad, what's happening? A week ago, I overheard Preston on the phone with Clifton. They plan to evict me tonight at this dinner in front of everyone. Silence. Delia's breath caught. I just acted first. Everything in those documents is legal and proper. But we're family. Her voice rose desperate. This is our home. Eugene's reply came quiet but without give. No, sweetheart, it's my home. It always was. And family doesn't conspire to throw someone out on the street. I love you, but I won't be used anymore. A pause. She could hear him breathing steady and even. You have 30 days. That's more than you were planning to give me. The line went dead. Delia lowered the phone, slowly stared at it, as though she'd never seen one before. Around her, 12 faces watched with varying degrees of shock and discomfort. Clifton Farrow shot to his feet. his chair scraping hard against the hardwood floor. His face had gone crimson, both hands balled into fists. "That old fool, we'll sue him. This is illegal eviction, retaliation." Bernadette set down her water glass and cut through his bluster with quiet precision. "You'll lose. Eugene owns the house outright, his name alone on the deed. You're guests, not tenants. No lease exists. No rent was ever paid." Clifton turned on her. "You knew about this." "I suspected." Bernadette didn't flinch. "Eugene's not stupid. Neither am I." Preston finally found his voice, though it came out hollow and distant. "There has to be something wrong with these documents. Some error." Bernadette picked up the eviction notice and looked it over with a professional eye. Attorney SIL, proper 30-day notice period, legal language correctly formatted. She set it back down. "It's legitimate. I'm sorry, Preston, but you brought this on yourself." The room went quiet again, airless, suffocating. One of Preston's colleagues cleared his throat and stood up. "Preston, man, we should probably get going." His wife nodded quickly. "Early day tomorrow, you understand." Preston looked up dazed. "Yeah, sure." Another couple rose. "Thanks for, we'll call you." They didn't wait for a reply. Like dominoes tipping over, the exodus began. Murmured apologies, eyes sliding away, coats grabbed fast. One by one, the carefully assembled witnesses the audience Preston had gathered for Eugene's humiliation fled the scene of his own undoing. Clifton seized both suitcase handles and dragged them toward the door with barely contained fury. The bags that were supposed to carry Eugene's belongings out of his own house now stood as monuments to a plan that had collapsed entirely. He didn't say a word, just slammed the door behind him hard enough to shake the windows. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty except for Delia weeping at the table and Preston sitting motionless in his chair, the documents spread in front of him like evidence at a trial. The Christmas tree blinked its colored lights. The untouched feast went cold. The place settings sat undisturbed, careful arrangements for a celebration that would never come. Preston's phone lit up as he worked through his contacts. Every call hit voicemail. The same message over and over: law offices closed for the holiday, leave a message after the tone. He set the phone down, picked the documents back up, and went through them line by line, fingertip trailing the text, as if pure concentration might expose some flaw. He studied the dates, the signatures, the legal language. He opened his laptop, started searching. Washington eviction, law guest versus tenant notice requirements. Every result confirmed what Bernadette had already told him. He sank back in his chair. "It's real, isn't it?" Delia's voice was barely above a whisper. Preston didn't answer. He just stared at the papers that had dismantled everything. Hours went by. More calls, more messages, more searches, nothing useful. Around 11, Delia picked up her phone again and dialed with unsteady fingers. Eugene answered on the first ring. "Delia, can we talk tomorrow?" A brief pause. "Come to the house, 1 o'clock, alone." Click. Delia lowered the phone and looked at Preston. "He's coming back tomorrow." Preston said nothing, just kept staring at the wall, at the life that had come apart in a single evening. At a modest hotel somewhere on Seattle's outskirts, Eugene set down his phone, stood at the window, and looked out at the city lights, the scattered Christmas decorations glowing across the dark. For the first time in 2 years, the weight was gone. The pressure, the obligation, the slow, steady erosion of dignity and space. He climbed into bed, placed his phone on the nightstand, turned off the light, and slept soundly until morning. I came home the following afternoon, December 26th. The house was still Christmas decorations lit up in the windows, but the feeling hollowed out drained away. I let myself in with my key to my house, and found Delia sitting alone at the kitchen table. Preston wasn't there. She'd come by herself as I'd asked. "Dad." Her eyes were red, her face swollen from crying. I poured coffee for us both and sat across from her. "I want you to understand something. I love you. That never changed, but I couldn't let him take my home." "I didn't know," her voice broke, "about his plan, about any of it." I opened my folder, pulled out the financial records, and laid them across the table. $47,300, every payment listed by date, amount, and purpose. 2 years of retirement savings poured into Preston's schemes. Every time he asked, I gave. I pressed my finger to the spreadsheet. Every promise he made about paying me back, about the next deal, about getting himself established, all of it lies. And Wednesday night, I heard him on the phone with Clifton plotting to have me declared incompetent, plotting to take this house. Delia's hands flew up to cover her mouth. He had suitcases at dinner, Delia, moving bags. He was going to ship me off to some facility and install his father in my bedroom. My home was going to become their property. She wept. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it, should have stopped it. You were manipulated too, but now you have a choice. I drew the papers back. I won't stop you from seeing your children, you're their mother. But Preston cannot set foot here again. The eviction stands. What do I do? That's your call to make. But I'd start by figuring out what you actually want for yourself, not what he tells you to want. Over the weeks that followed, Delia made her choice. She consulted 3 different attorneys on Preston's behalf, hunting for some legal foothold to challenge the eviction. Each one told her the same thing Bernadette had already said. The eviction was valid, properly executed, legally sound. By mid-January, Preston had moved into an apartment in Bellevue. Delia remained at the house with the children sleeping in the guest room. We hardly spoke during those days. The air between us carried the weight of pain that hadn't yet been addressed. On January 24th, exactly 30 days after Christmas, Preston came for the last of his things. I was there when he loaded the final boxes into his truck. He stopped at the door and looked at me. You could have just talked to me. I held his gaze. I did talk to you. For 2 years. Every time I wrote a check, every time I covered another bill, every time I said yes when I should have said no. You just never listened. He had nothing to say to that. He climbed into his truck and drove away. I never saw him again. In February, Delia filed for divorce. In March, she found a teaching position at a private school in Capitol Hill. By April, she'd rented a small house nearby, close enough that I could see my grandchildren regularly, far enough that she was carving out her own life. She insisted on paying for the time she'd stayed, $450 a month sent in a transfer every first of the month. I tried to refuse. She wouldn't hear it. I need to do this, Dad. I need to know I can stand on my own. I accepted the transfers. Through spring and summer, our relationship slowly found its footing again. Not what it had been before, something different, built on honesty this time, and real in a way it hadn't been. She brought the children over on weekends. We'd sit in my backyard, my yard beside my house and my space, and watch them run around. She never asked me to forgive. Preston never floated the idea of reconciliation. She had read the evidence, understood the betrayal, and made her decision. On August 29th, my 68th birthday, Delia brought dinner over to the house. Real food, not takeout. The kids made me cards with crayons and glitter. After dinner, once the children had drifted off to the living room with their toys, Delia came and sat beside me on the back porch. I want to say something. I waited. Thank you. Her voice was steady and clear. For 2 years, I watched Preston use you. I told myself you were being generous, that you wanted to help. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. And I let it go on because it was easier than standing up to him. She looked at me. You showed me what courage looks like, what having limits looks like. You fought for yourself when I couldn't fight for you. And in doing that, you showed me how to fight for myself. My throat tightened. You're doing well. The job, the house, the kids. You're building something real. Because you showed me it was possible. She squeezed my hand. I'm proud to be your daughter. I pulled her into a hug. My daughter, my home, my life. All of it reclaimed, restored, rebuilt. Not without scars. Some wounds take longer to close, some gaps remain, but honest, clean mine. Later that evening, after Delia and the children had gone, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet, peaceful. The space felt like mine again. No one running schemes, no one working angles, no one grinding down my dignity one check at a time. I'd spent $47,000 learning something about boundaries, about saying no, about standing up for what was mine. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. That means something to me. Looking back, what happened in that house cost me more than $47,300. It cost me 2 years of peace, 2 years of trusting people who had already decided I was a problem to be managed rather than a father to be loved. I believe God doesn't waste any of that. The pain had a purpose. It stripped away the comfort of pretending everything was fine, and it forced me to stand up for myself in a way I should have done much sooner. What I gained back, my home, my dignity, my relationship with my daughter on honest terms, was worth every hard step it took to get there. Here is what this family revenge story taught me, and what I hope it gives you to carry. If someone keeps asking and never gives back, That is not a rough patch, that is a pattern. Name it early. Document everything. Kindness without a paper trail is just generosity that can be denied later. The people who count on you being too gentle to fight back are always surprised when you finally do. Stay quiet. Stay prepared. Let the moment speak for itself. And if your child is being used by someone they love, don't abandon them. Make the truth impossible to ignore, and then give them the space to choose. This is the kind of story I share here on Dad's Revenge because I know some of you are living a version of it right now. If this reached something in, you share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me what you took from Eugene's story. I read everyone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join us. New stories go up regularly, and every one of them is worth your time. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself out there. I'll see you in the next one.